Hello YouTube. So I wanted to do a quick video um, on the issue of what is patriarchy, right? Because I think that there's there's confusion about this, and also I think I like making videos on feminist topics, um, just because I don't really have the amount of subscribers to actually experience a backlash. So I feel like I can just kind of post whatever I want on the subject, um, and that makes me happy. So um, people have people seem to have this notion of patriarchy, or this is my understanding of it. And please tell me if you think I'm wrong. People seem to have this notion of patriarchy like it's a a bunch of men. Like one extreme would be like there's like a conspiracy theory idea of men getting together and dictating things. You know, how do we oppress women today? Right? Um, uh, and I don't think that there are many feminists who believe that. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. Um, but that, I mean, you could imagine that very sort of tight conspiracy theory model into a wider model of sort of what we imagine the 1950s to be like. You know, women had their place in society and men had their place in society, and there was a sort of systematic cultural oppression of men over women, right? And that's a slightly, or that's a much broader notion of what the idea of patriarchy is. And I think that this is what most of the, let's say, YouTube anti-feminists um, think of when they think of patriarchy. Uh, I think that that's the image that's in their heads, and it might be the image that's in the heads of lots of feminists too. Um, but I don't think that that's what it comes down to, right? I don't think that it's that that schematic necessarily is applicable to the modern world in the same way that it was previously. At least not in any one-to-one translation. Um, and nonetheless, I do think that there is such a thing as patriarchy. Um, what it comes down to, though, I think, is that there's a certain tendency in thought, in just human thought. It's we see it across the board that if you have two terms that are mutually exclusive, we have a tendency to privilege one over the other, and in a hierarchical relationship, right? And so we can see this in philosophy. Um, this is a lot of the point of deconstruction, right? Um, we could see, you know, we have if we have like appearance and essence are two concepts in philosophy, and at some point in the history of philosophy, something like a choice must have happened where we privilege essence or reality, if you like, over appearance. Um, you know, we have appearance, we want to get at the essence. Appearance is, you know, essence is better than appearance somehow, right? So there are these tendencies to organize things into binary oppositions and then to privilege one term over the other, um, and that tendency, when talking about gender, you know, you have men and women, and it's just a tendency of thought to organize these in a hierarchical relationship. That tendency is that which I would refer to with the word patriarchy, right? And that can manifest itself in institutions in a wide variety of ways, and it can also not manifest itself in institutions in a wide variety of ways, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it, you know, it doesn't exist or it doesn't happen, right? Now, if we can see this in other languages, right? And I don't speak another language, so please, somebody, if you do speak another language, correct me in the comments section. I have a friend who was studying who was studying Chinese in college, and and the way he described it to me, it's as though men and women speak two different languages in Chinese. And he said that the closest or the easiest way that he can describe it is that women speak cute Chinese, right? They speak a certain, or they speak a slightly different dialect. I'll put it that way. This is a division on the basis. This is a linguistic division on the basis of sex. You see this in Chinese. You see this in German, for instance. When you address a woman, you address her differently than if you address a man, right? So there's this linguistic division. You also see it in Latinate languages, the Romance languages, with nouns get ascribed gendered, or all the nouns are gendered, right? So you have this division. It doesn't seem to me to be a step. It seems to me to be a truism that when you divide things in such a way that that those things become hierarchically organized, right, at the level of concept. This this is the problem, right? I think that this is the problem. So, in some way, that distinction or that hierarchical organization doesn't necessarily actually need to be reified into some kind of institutional structure, like the workplace or something, in order to exist, right? So if we could imagine a scenario wherein like the law treats men and women equally, whatever that might mean, or institutions are barred from treating men and women differently, or whatever. If we could imagine that, like a perfect utopian version of that situation, it actually wouldn't then follow that patriarchy doesn't exist, right? So it seems, and I'm not sure about this, I don't necessarily think that there is a way out of patriarchy, right? I don't necessarily buy that. It seems to me to just be a kind of tendency in human thought. It doesn't. I'm not a fatalist about the issue, right? Things can be done, right? Things ought to be done. But it doesn't seem to me that there is such a thing as a non-patriarchal institutional framework, right? It doesn't. That seems to me to be an absurdity, or almost a reductio ad absurdum, right? Because the logic by which we conceive institutions is already against that conceptual background, right? And this is true about, take the most wild radical feminists that you like. Clearly, at least under this heading of patriarchy, under this conception of patriarchy, they can't, the most wildly radical feminist that you can imagine is also essentially patriarchal, in one way or another. So that's difficult, right? But for me, the way to deal with the issue is, of course, to not conceive of this as a binary operation. To not, there's no reason to think of men and women as a dichotomy, particularly with the rise of transgendered people and etc. And there becomes more and more gray area between the two terms. Um, and I think that this dichotomy is challenged um, also by the rise of, for instance, the rise of gay marriage. I think is essential to destabilizing this binary operation, right? Because when the sexual identity of a male, how that's conceived in a society, changes, then these two terms also change, and again become a little bit more destabilized. So you have these sort of gray areas that are being articulated as time goes on. I don't mean to ever say that we won't conceive of men and women dichotomously sometime in the future. Um, I think it would be a good thing. And I don't mean to say that it's necessarily the case that thinking non-dichotomously about men and women will actually somehow fix the problem. It's possible that we can also arrange three terms into a hierarchy, for instance. Um, so I don't know if that necessarily works in the long run, but it seems to me to be the only course of action. And as such, I think that feminism in certain forms, at least what I would call liberal feminism, I have much more respect in a certain way for the radical feminists than I do for the liberal feminists. So what I would call liberal feminism is actually antithetical to its own cause in this sense, because it still conceives of, you know, women need to be equal with men, right? And therefore, just by definition, when you use that formula, um, there are two sides on an equal sign, right? You're putting things into this binary form. So there's kind of a self-defeating aspect to this rhetoric of equality, I think. It's not to say that I'm in principle against equality. It's just that I'm a little shaky about the language there. It seems to me to be problematic. But furthermore, it seems that any conception of um, feminism, which is, we as women, if you like, need to establish ourselves, you know, against or alongside, depending on what it is, men, right? And to see the world in those terms is actually undermines what feminism is. So that's a quick explication of what I think patriarchy is, and a quick critique of feminism. Um, from, I think, a much more radically feminist perspective. So thank you very much, and I'm hoping to get some good down thumbs on this video, and have a good day.